poisoning attack. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
As Russian forces gather along Ukraine's border, the Pentagon has placed 8,500 troops on heightened alert for possible deployment to NATO countries in Eastern Europe. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb spoke with Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby about the U.S. position and potential military involvement.
The president has been very clear that in the event of another invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces, the U.S. forces will not be engaged on the ground in combat in Ukraine. He's made that very, very clear. But he's also made it very clear that we have an obligation to our NATO allies to make sure that we're backing up our Article 5 commitments to the alliance. And so we are exploring a range of options to help bolster the alliance on the eastern flank and to prove our dedication to that very ironclad security commitment inside NATO.
And so clearly by invading Ukraine, Russia would put the pressure on the U.S. and NATO to bolster their eastern flank with troops and other defenses, yes?
Look, I would argue that already there's a feeling of some pressure inside the alliance to make sure that it is clear to Mr. Putin how seriously all the allies take our mutual defense requirements. So we've got to make sure that that not only do we send a strong signal about NATO solidarity, but that the alliance really is solidly prepared to defend itself if needed.
You mentioned the building up of defenses, and one of those domains that we have in the defense world is cyber. The Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber is in Europe as we speak. Would a cyber attack on Ukraine constitute a Russian incursion?
Well, I think I'd say what the president said was any incursion in Ukraine would trigger economic consequences, and I think I'd rather not characterize it beyond that. That said, you're right that we have seen this out of the Russian playbook before, the use of cyber operations to sow discord or to try to incite violence, to disrupt infrastructure. And we would not be surprised to see that again used by Russia in the run-up to perhaps something more conventional from a military perspective. And we have, as you know, we have a small number of trainers in Ukraine, and since 2014, the United States has helped contribute to better cyber resilience inside Ukraine. Not to say it's perfect, but I think the Ukrainians understand too that that is a tool that the Russians could use, and that we all need to be mindful of that and to be watching out for it.
You have said here in this room that Russia has more than 100,000 troops at the border with Ukraine. Russia is denying that currently, so why not declassify some intelligence to show who's telling the truth? Well,
look, I mean, we're confident in our assessments, and we are careful in the degree to which we talk about those assessments. I think that's the prudent thing to do here when you're dealing with an actor like Russia. They also have denied that they have any intention to invade Ukraine again, to violate Ukrainian sovereignty. So, a way to prove that would be to take those more than 100,000 troops and send them back home, rather than keep them arrayed as they are around the eastern and northeastern border of Ukraine, down south around Crimea, and then in occupied Crimea, and then in Belarus too.
And then the final question, you've been talking about the escalation that Russia has been doing. Have they shown any signs of de-escalating at this point?
No, they have not. As I said, even just as recently as today, we continue to see the flow of additional combined arms capabilities from elsewhere in Russia to the border with Ukraine and into Belarus. So no, there's been no sign from a military perspective of de-escalation. Now, on the diplomatic side, there was an exchange between Minister Lavrov and Secretary Blinken, and I think you heard Secretary Blinken say that he still believes that there's time and space for dialogue, and we, of all people, we absolutely fully support that and want to see that happen. That's the best way forward here to de-escalate this this potential crisis here. But from a military perspective, no, we continue to see added capability, and that's deeply concerning.
Ukraine's leaders are trying to calm anxieties of a country trying to conduct business as usual. But it's hard to dismiss the threat across the border. Our Ricardo Marquina has been reporting from inside Ukraine for more than a week, watching Ukrainians trade war preparation tips on social media while trying to live life as normal. Here's his report from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv.
On the outskirts of Kiev, a group of about 200 men and women receive military training. They are civilians who have joined the Territorial Defence Force, a reserve corps set up by authorities to support the Ukrainian armed forces in the event of a conflict. They train on their own time and they buy their own weapons.
I am here to learn fighting techniques and support the army to defend Ukraine.
Russian military pressure on Ukraine, with a massive deployment not far from its eastern border, has once again raised the spectre of war. For many here, the question is not whether there will be a war, but when.
Putin believes that there is no country called Ukraine and that he has to take it under his control. Since he could not do it by changing his government from within, he only has one option left, the military path.
After more weeks of intense media reporting on a possible conflict, those in charge of these exercises want to reduce tensions among the Ukrainian population and are urging calm, including among these trainees.
Our commanders tell us, clean the gun, get ready, and don't panic. That is the Ukrainian way.
The following workday, these men and women will return to their jobs in the city, while in Moscow and Washington, the political tug-of-war that could push them to war will continue. For Ricardo Marquina in Kiev, John Spear, VOA News.
Miroslava Gongadze has covered Ukraine for VOA since 2004 as anchor of our daily TV news show Chaz Time and chief of our Ukrainian service. She has recently been promoted to VOA's Eastern Europe chief, based in Kyiv. I spoke to Miroslava about how the crisis is being handled in Ukraine.
It feels like living near the volcano that can erupt any time. So they kind of get used to this permanent, constant threats, and they cope with it. However, this recent months, the threat is more imminent. So people are starting preparing more. They are signing up for defense. Local defense groups. They are buying arms. They are buying weapons. They are legally, obviously. It's possible to buy weapons in Ukraine. They are creating safe houses. They are planning their escape routes. They are planning to take their families out.
Do you think that these are evenly matched forces?
Unfortunately, it's definitely not evenly matched forces. I have to say that Ukrainians' armed forces are heavily outnumbered and outgunned by Russia's army. But military experts say that they would be capable of mounting significant resistance and inflicting heavy casualties if Russia were to launch a large-scale invasion.
Let's talk about the different messages coming out of Washington and Kyiv, with the White House saying that invasion is imminent, and President Zelensky saying this is overblown. There's no need to overreact. Can you explain to us why we're hearing those two messages and what the consequences of that mixed messaging could be?
My take would be that it's just probably unimaginable unimaginable for Ukrainians and for Ukrainian government that something like that can happen, meaning that full-scale invasion can happen. Everybody understands that this, if this invasion will happen, that will change Ukraine, it will change the Europe, and will change the
world, is what President Joe Biden said. He said this would be the biggest deal since World War II. Do you agree with that statement?
I totally agree with that. I think the Joseph Biden and our NATO, U.S. NATO allies understand, specifically Europeans who are close to member of European Union and those who are close to Russia, like Poland, Romania, those countries in the North Baltic states. They are aware of Russian threats, and they feel and understand it the most. And they do ask United States and NATO to help and to support more.
And then finally, I just want to talk about some of the other players on this very complex chessboard. We see this as a big contest between NATO and Russia, with Ukraine caught in the middle. But let's talk about the other characters. We also have China, and we also have Turkey. Those are two that come to mind.
Turkey is trying to play both cards. They need to maintain their good economic, specifically political relationship with Russia. But at the same time, they do want to have Ukraine, to support Ukraine as well. In terms of China is for years trying to put their foot into Ukrainian economy, and there are some forces in Ukrainian government, in the Ukrainian parliament, who are supporting China's involvement and bigger engagement with China.
Any clash between Russia and Ukraine will threaten Europe's energy security. The European Union gets about a third of its natural gas from Russia. Economic sanctions are expected to target Russia's energy sector, and China is watching the situation with great interest. Our Henry Ridgewell has the inside story from London.
Western nations have threatened unprecedented economic sanctions against Moscow if it invades Ukraine. If cut off by the West, could Russia look east to China for help?
The policy I think China is likely to take is to do whatever they can to help the Russians to face up to the economic sanctions that the US and Europeans may impose on Russia. Economic links between China and Russia are not really strong enough to replace any break off of economic links between Russia and Europe.
China has offered political support for Moscow in its standoff over Ukraine.
This foreign policy coordination will definitely increase because from the Russian perspective, intensification of the military partnership between Russia and China is precisely one of the major pains which Russia can inflict to the United States and NATO.
Meanwhile, China is closely watching NATO and America's response to any Russian invasion.
Even though there's these troop deployments to Eastern European states, no states are talking about directly sending troops into Ukraine itself to defend. And of course, China is taking note of that with some of their own territorial disputes in their own area.
Taiwan is China's biggest territorial dispute, and there is a risk of miscalculation as Beijing watches events unfold in Ukraine, says Steve Tsang.
The Chinese seeing the Americans and the Europeans talking big, but not doing very much about it, which would embolden them over Taiwan and potentially miscalculate what the American responses to a crisis over Taiwan might be.
Despite their mutual rivalry with the US, China and Russia's interests don't always align. Beijing's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative cuts through several former Soviet bloc states, including Ukraine. A direct rail and ferry freight link opened in 2016, linking China with Ukraine's Black Sea coast via Georgia, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, bypassing Russia. China has also funded infrastructure projects, including a new metro line for Kiev. If Russia invades Ukraine, could Beijing's investments in the region be at risk?
The more immediate impact on the Belt and Road Initiative would in fact be the Russian military intervention in Kazakhstan. And the Chinese government actually have shown that they are quite relaxed and comfortable with that. To them, it's more important to support authoritarian states and autocrats to stay in power, and then for some of them to be closer to Russia than to China at the moment. Over the longer term, things may change.
In the short term, analysts say China is keen to keep a lid on the simmering tensions for at least the next few weeks as it prepares to host the Winter Olympics. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter at 6ArmsPowell. Connect with VOA News on Instagram and Facebook, and stay with voanews.com for all the latest news and information. See you next week for the Inside Story.
Reading is an essential habit and a culture that must be developed. Nigerians are generally believed to have a poor reading culture. The role of government in promoting reading and equipping reading spaces and libraries in Nigeria cannot be underestimated. But first, we must look at the development of reading habits from the home and the role parents play in encouraging their children.
My parents, my mom used to be a teacher, so reading was obviously part of a curriculum. And then my father used to be a professor and is an author. So I started reading very, very early, and I started reading books that were higher than my age grade. I was reading African Writer series from age 7, age 8, and reading encyclopedias by that time. So obviously my parents had a huge part and encouraged that in me.
In the Nigerian book market, there's a high influx of foreign authors writing for children, but very few Nigerian authors telling relatable, homegrown Nigerian stories.
If you start out reading stories even to your baby, even before they're 1, and then as they get older, buy appropriate materials that are colorful, with easy to read words, and read with them. I think that helps.
Adedotun Enyade, a co-founder of Robin Heights, a leading bookstore in Nigeria, has tips for Nigerian authors and how they can improve on their work and get into the hearts of readers.
The story has to be good, right? If you're writing, whatever you're writing, if you're writing fiction, if you're writing non-fiction, it has to be really, really compelling, one. The next thing would be in terms of the packaging, right? People have gone past the era where you just take your books to just about any printer to print for you. I think, publishers, self-published authors as well, they need to invest in ensuring that the quality of the book, the final output is one that would stack up with any book published elsewhere in the world. So that's really important. Then I think what would be the most important tip for me to them would be just they need to invest in marketing.
The book business, like any other business, is challenging.
If you ask anyone who's running the business in Nigeria, they will tell you capital, of course, right? Book selling is also, as with any other business, is also quite capital intensive. Getting to pay your rent, getting to actually buy the books and stock up your shelves when you have them. Hiring good people requires decent amount of capital. So I would say it's getting the startup funds to set up something, and then if you're looking to do it at scale like we're hoping to do, then it also requires you raising funding, which isn't readily available in commercial banks, right? I don't think a bank would say they want to give you a loan to set up a bookstore. They probably will be skeptical about the number of people who read. So for us, I think it's just I would say capital is at the top of the totem pole.
It is commendable that certain individuals and organizations are making concerted efforts to revive the reading culture in the country. The government should also redesign the school curriculum to incorporate more reading activities in primary and secondary schools.
Increase the reach of your events or business services. To advertise on Plus TV Africa, please call 0906 000 5719 or 0909 040 8408 or send an email to marketing@plustvafrica.com. Plus TV Africa. Big stories live here.
Hello and welcome to One on One. My name is Fumi Unwajefe, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about embedded finance as a solution for non-financial businesses and the growing tech space in Nigeria. My guest today is referred to as a chief plumber. His name is Okwe Adeoye, and he has spent over 17 years in the technology and payment ecosystem in various capacities, including engineering, leading high-performance product teams. Okwe spent 11 years at InterSwitch Nigeria. In the process, created and led the creation of the Quick Teller product line and ran it as a business unit before handing it over, from strategy to product design and management to architecture, the entire works. Now he started his own Nigerian API fintech startup, OnePipe, and it recently raised $950,000 in pre-seed investment. He believes the world needs a new type of financial service ecosystem, one where everyone has a role to play and everyone has some value to capture. Thank you, Okwe, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell us, what was growing up like? Were you, so I always like to ask this question, especially to the tech guys. Were you like a nerd growing up? What were you as a child?
Is there any nerd that will tell you that I was a nerd? So I think I wasn't one of those cool children. I wasn't cool in any way. I think I was a nerd.
Okay.
I think I was pretty reserved. Typically always at home.
You're still reserved now. It took a lot of talking to get you out.
Yeah, so always reading a comic, always buried in fiction, usually. But I wouldn't say I was a tech child, per se.
So now that you're in the financial space, is that something you know, when we're all younger, we always had this thing, I want to be this and this. So you're reading comics and all of that. What did you want to be when you were younger, and then how you found yourself?
Spider-Man. I wanted to be Nigeria Spider-Man.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to be Nigeria Spider-Man. Like every child, you want to be this, then you want to be that, then you want to be that. But there was one thing that, after a while, I was like, I think I would like to be an inventor. The picture I had in my head is a mad inventor in his basement, always creating something new. And then there's a world out there with the thing he creates, he can be watching them play with the thing from outside so that they don't. So that's sort of the picture I had in my head for what I want to be when I grow up. As things evolved, I thought the solution to that was, I'm going to become an electronics expert. I'm going to move to Japan. Then growing up was like Sharp and Sanyo. I'm going to move to Japan and become an electronics expert. Then because of that, I went to study electrical engineering. Then in the course of studying electrical engineering, I'm like, this thing is hard. I don't think this is going to work. Somewhere in the course of that, I picked up coding. And that's how I entered tech. But I wanted to be an inventor. I hope somehow I'm halfway in the course of that journey now. Maybe somehow I could be an inventor.
Interesting. So, the thing with tech, especially when you hear that people raise so much money, many people don't hear about the not so successful stories. So I want you to tell us about Twi Labs. Sure. What was it about? What happened and all?
Okay, so I was like, I'm going to start a company. It's time. So I've always planned to start a company, like as far back as I know. Even growing up, I told my parents when I was leaving school that I don't want to work for anybody. My mom convinced me that no, you need to start from somewhere. This thing, you don't just jump into it. So they start from somewhere, ended up becoming like 13 years of paid employment. But I'd always thought I would start something someday, that would invent something. And my thought was, after spending quite some time in the corporate world, to start a lab that can produce products on the fly and turn those products into companies. Like, that was the idea behind Toy Labs. Luckily for me, I had like a group of friends who understood that concept, who backed us with a little bit amount of capital to get started. But before we knew it, the money was finished. None of the product had taken roots. It didn't know the work, if I can put it like that. All the money had gone. My savings had gone with it. I'd moved from the house I was living to another one, taking my daughter from the school she was in to another one. My second daughter could not start school yet because, are you sure we can afford this thing now? So there was all of that going on. I put my wife's car on Uber. So there was quite a bit of that. And then, but all of this happened in the space of 1 year. Like this entire, from employed guy that thought it was all that, to this guy is just struggling and doesn't know what he's doing. All of it happened in like 1 year. Then was at the end of that 1 year, we're like, let's do something different. Which of the things in these Toy Labs look like it is making sense? It was the thing then called PayPipe, like payment aggregation. Like, okay, can we reorganize it a little bit and call it one pipe instead and turn it to a company, and let's just face it. It was a painful process. Like, Toy Labs were 24 people at some point. We had to let go of almost everybody.
Oh, wow.
And it was just 6 of us that crossed to continue the one pipe journey out of that. So yes, it was a painful personal experience for me. I won't lie. It really was painful. I'm like, who sent you to do this thing? But
what are the lessons that you've learned from the failure of Toy Labs and you are using very effectively in one pipe now?
To be honest, I would say the biggest lesson is that there are no failures, that there's only learning. And whatever you think is a failure, it's really just if your staying power can get past that phase. The thing you went through in that period is a contribution for you. Like, one of the things I took away from the Toy Labs experience was that I find that younger, hungry, driven people are an asset for you. Like, we are all trying to make this thing work. We don't know this thing, so we're trying to do it. So people with such a mindset are a significant asset versus people with a chip on their shoulder, at least depending on the stage that you are in. I took that lesson, and it's even part of the things that drive our hiring process at One Pipe now. Like, we need to check, like in every interview, we make sure that we ask the people, what do you really want from your life in 5 years? You have to articulate it as clearly as you want. You have to articulate it back to us, how we can help you do that before we even discuss your work at One Pipe. Like, what's important to you? Do you see us helping? Is there a line that we can find some kind of synergy? If yes, let's continue this interview. If not, it's been real. We shake hands, we move.
Yes, that's very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about, you've started this company, finding the right staff of people, because I know, like, the tech space, they poach your people like this. Somebody is dangling money somewhere. Somebody is, so you've gone through this process. This person has, pledged their loyalty and everything to you. But look, somebody's promising me ×5 of my salary. They'll move me abroad. They'll do all of that. How do you, you've talked about getting the right stuff, but how do you now keep this good talent that you have for your business?
If I tell you I know the answer, I am lying. Because if I know the answer, I shouldn't be running One Pipe. I should be running some kind of talent thing. But hard facts will be, since we started One Pipe, we're roughly 33 now, if I have the number correct. Up until December this year, only one person had ever left us. And
how many years has One Pipe existed for?
3 now.
3 years, okay.
Yeah. So while people talk about talent attrition, I think we don't have that problem, at least not yet. What is working, I think only time will tell. But I think part of what our team likes is this sense of openness, transparency. Like, I go to them, I'm a first-time CEO. Like, I don't know this thing. So if you ask me, 2 of us are looking at each other. So I think people appreciate that sense of candor.
Honesty, yeah.
They appreciate that sense of, I'm supporting this guy. Now, for me, that's like something to even be afraid of. Like, I always tell them, don't look up to me, I beg. Me too, I'm looking for who to look up to. Like, don't look up to me. But I think that kind of candor, that kind of, this is a real place where all real people helps people. And we even look each other in the eye and say, I know you're in the tech space. I know they are dangling carrots in front of you. My guy, feel free to explore. Just make sure that this our mission that we're pursuing together does not suffer. Like, I belong to several like tech groups where I'm like, this guy is on my team, but look at him in this channel doing this other gig. Like, it's fine. As long as there's a mission we're chasing,
Yeah.
our mission is moving, and you need to support yourself with some other way or some other thing, please keep doing that. Let's just keep our mission going. And everyone is an equity holder in the company. So it feels like it's
fantastic.
our company. So no matter what you do, when you need more money, go find your more money somewhere. We don't have it here. But see, your long-term value is here. So let's just do it together. So a sense of mission, joint ownership, maybe. But time will tell if those are the right formula to.
Well done. Like, I know it's not as easy as I've just made it sound so simple.
It's not simple.
Okay, so let's talk about embedded finance. Break it down to me as a layman in the simplest of terms. What is embedded finance?
Okay, I'll use a very practical example if you don't mind. I ran into a company in Kenya that says we provide inputs to fish farmers.
Okay.
Now, this input costs a lot of money. The average fish farmer cannot afford the input. But you know, you're looking at the guy's pond. I know that in 9 months, this pond is worth $50,000. You know that. But you need to supply feed of X value. You need to feed them every day of this value. And just doesn't have it. But in the meantime, you need to pay school fees. You need to pay transport, buy petrol. So this company provided those fish farmers that I'll be the one sending you your inputs. I'll be the one paying for the things you need in your life. But when your fish is done, I'm the one who collects it and I'm the one who sells it. Now, effectively, this company became the bank of the farmer. It's like, I will give you money every month. I will pay for all the things you need me to pay for. I'll give you a small bank account that your money is inside. I can use to do the things that matter to you. Be spending on me. But 9 months later, when your fish are ready, I'm going to harvest it and I'm going to go sell it and bring you back your small change.
Profit, yeah.
So embedded finance is an approach where non-finance companies can provide finance products to customers that they know in their own value chain usually, and as a way to be the bank of those people. And once you put it that way, it's like